Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. It's quite a conundrum. You tell somebody, federal government spending has increased in real terms 60% in 2019. Did you think the government was too small in 2019? Well, it's 60% bigger, at least in terms of cost. And do you feel like you're getting 60% more in terms of benefits? Well, and most people, I think, would say no. And then so you get sort of intellectual buy-in to reduce the rate of spending, reduce the rate and amount of spending, particularly when you add in, we've got this $37 trillion in debt and $100 trillion in unfunded entitlement liabilities. And so it becomes a bit of a complicated financial picture. But then when you get down to the brass tacks of cutting the things that should be cut, well, there's constituencies built up around those, including for a lot of big spending Republicans in Congress, and therein lies the rub. Ron Johnson, our friend north of the Cheddar Curtain there in Wisconsin, Senator Ron Johnson, expressing his frustration with what the big, beautiful bill looks like at present, saying what's being discussed is not something he can support. I doubt it passes the Senate. That's what he says. He adds, I doubt Mr. Trump's voters expect us to continue spending at President Biden's levels, which led to the inflation they elected Republicans last year to stop. I doubt, too, that Trump voters will be elated to see the GOP embrace Democrat policies and priorities, including Obamacare, which seems to have found new life under the same Medicaid, under the name, quote-unquote, Medicaid expansion. And I can't imagine they want Republicans to increase annual deficits. That's why I can't support this bill in it as it's currently being discussed. And so he says there needs to be a multi-step strategy on the budget reconciliation without getting too deep in the weeds on this. Focus on the priorities that were contained in the Senate's original budget resolution, border security, defense priorities. Bank $850 billion in real spending reductions. Pass a bill that extends the current tax law, Trump tax relief from 2017, to prevent the automatic 2026 tax increase. And avoid default by including a smaller increase in the debt ceiling that maintains the pressure and leverage to achieve future spending reductions. And he goes into more detail from there, but that's sort of a strategic approach that he outlines. Let's see what our friend Larry Elder thinks about the big, beautiful bill and how Trump should deal with congressional Republicans, particularly those that can't seem to get their snouts out of the trough. By the way, Larry Elder, as you heard, we have Cigar Night with Larry Elder again. It's been a few years. We had a great time the last time Larry came to town, and Larry's so popular, we're doing 2 nights for the first time, 2 Cigar Nights. May 21, that's at it's in Pingree Grove at the farm. What's the name of the farm? I'm blanking. Gobert's Farm.
Gobert, yes.
And May 22nd, Gaelic Park in Oak Forest, and you go to 560theanswer.com/cigar, 560theanswer.com/cigar.
And we have a few seats left, so get on. If you're thinking about going, don't text or email us like, hey, I forgot to buy a ticket, can I get in? Buy your ticket now. Go to 560theanswer.com/cigar.
What could be better than having a cigar and intelligent discourse from the sage of South Central, Larry Elder, who joins us now. Larry, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Thank you so much for having me.
So, the big, beautiful bill, this is, as trade deals are moving in the right direction, this seems to be a bit of a question mark in terms of which direction it's moving. What's your perspective?
Well, you've outlined the problem, and this is why I had my brief campaign for president this last time. Mm-hmm. We need an amendment to fix spending to a certain percentage of the GDP. I would think no more than 10%, with possible exceptions for war and natural disaster. Otherwise, we're always going to have big government. Why? Because the number one agenda of most politicians is to get elected. Number two is to get reelected. And you don't get elected promising to take things away from people. Everybody talks about how big government is, but as soon as you put a specific program in front of him or her, you want this to go away? Do you want this to go away? Do you want us to radically change Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid? They say no. And that's why government has gotten so large. People are addicted to the spending, even if they argue that they're not. And the only real way to get government down to the size the Founding Fathers intended is for us to have a law that forces politicians to go into the room, lock the door, and don't come out until you trim the budget and reform these so-called entitlements programs to the point where only around 10% or so of the nation's income is spent on government. That's the only way you're ever going to get a handle on this. Otherwise, think about it. We have something called the Freedom Caucus in the Republican Party. That's a party that really is about cutting spending and getting it down to the size the Founding Fathers intended. Why isn't the entire Republican Party the Freedom Caucus?
Yeah.
Well, what entitlement program would you start with?
All of them. Even Barack Obama said Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are unsustainable. Bill Clinton said they're unsustainable. They all ought to be reformed. Social Security, you should allow younger people to invest their contribution into the stock market or into some sort of interest-bearing account they can get when they get to be 65 years old. We're now paying out more money than we're taking in for Social Security. It is unsustainable unless you dramatically change the program. Same thing with Medicare, same thing with Medicaid. But they're very popular, so therefore nobody wants to touch them.
Yeah, after reading Ron Johnson's piece, I was thinking, and you'll appreciate this, about the era back in the mid 90s to early 2000s when you had some conservative reform governors, like the Tommy Thompsons and the John Englers of the world. And right. Tabor was popular, the Taxpayer Bill of Rights legislation among reform conservatives that would handcuff government spending such that it could only increase by inflation or population, the combination of inflation and population growth. In some, it could only increase by either inflation or population growth, whichever was smaller. But regardless, that put a ceiling on the spend, and then every year you figure it out, but that you're only going up a couple of points, and even that brought state budgets, some of those Midwestern state budgets, Colorado too, under Owens, into balance until, of course, they figured out ways to dilute those statutes, and it sort of fell apart. But that had promise. I'm just trying to think of ideas that have worked in the past, maybe at the local level that can be scaled, and maybe that's one.
Well, Donald Trump is right. The government used to be funded with tariffs. Up until 1913, tariffs were the largest source of revenue for the federal government. And that's because the Founding Fathers never intended us to have all these so-called entitlement programs, whether it's, again, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, however popular they are, whether it's FEMA. Government has gotten way too big. In 1900, at all three levels, federal, state, and local, government took less than 10% from the American people. Now at all three levels, government takes 3 times that. And if you put some sort of value on so-called unfunded mandates, government takes almost half of what the American people produce. It is absolutely outrageous, which is why we high-five ourselves when we get 3% annual GDP growth. It should be growing at twice that, maybe even higher than that, if government got down to the size the Founding Fathers intended. Everybody can spend their money more efficiently, more effectively than can federal government. Leave more money in the pockets of people and watch the economy go crazy, and allow the needs of the needy, and they are going to be poor people, to be handled by churches, nonprofits, and people donating to other people.
We were talking about this a little bit earlier in the program. A lot of reviews of Doge here, with Musk taking a diminished role here in the near term. What's your assessment of the importance of Doge and continuing to build on what has been accomplished thus far?
Well, I'm really happy that finally somebody's doing something about the waste, fraud, and abuse. But basically, it's low-hanging fruit. I'm repeating myself, but the real drivers of our debt and deficit are the so-called entitlements programs. They need to be reformed. Why is the federal government involved in the issue of in the business of charity anyway with Medicaid? This should be done at the state level or at the local level. Until we have that kind of conversation, we're going to still have all these problems.
I want to get your take on something else too, because it's an interesting use of taxing power, and as free market conservatives, we're reticent to cheerlead tax increases. But what about Trump or the proposal that is circulating to increase taxes on college endowments and essentially to graduate it to hit the most prolific endowments that are out there, the Ivy League schools, Northwestern, Stanford, et cetera?
Well, I would ask, why is government giving money to colleges in the first place? Why are we backing these so-called student loans? At one time in this country, you went to a bank and you said, I want to go to college, and the banker would say, what are you going to major in? And you would say archaeology, and the banker would say, you're not going to get a loan from me. Give me a major where you can likely get a job. So we're subsidizing all these kids getting majors and having advanced degrees, and then they can't get a job. It's ridiculous. Again, government shouldn't be involved in this whatsoever. We ought not have a Department of Education. Ronald Reagan ran in 1980 to shut it down, and 8 years later it was bigger than it was before. At least Trump has signed an executive order to end the Department of Education. Hopefully he'll be able to pull it off. But again, I wonder, there are programs like Head Start. Head Start does not work. The kids that go into Head Start after a few years, compare them to those who didn't, and the learning is about the same, but they're very, very popular. Good luck trying to cut it.
Now, I wanted to ask you, I don't know if you're still living in California, but is there any clear...
If you can call it living, Amy.
Okay, well, surviving as we're doing here in Chicago. Yeah. But is there any clear Republican front runner right now for the governor's race? Because, the people that I know from California, they just assume, well, yeah, if Kamala Harris runs, she's going to win. Yeah. I'm like, you got to put up a fight right now. You got to find a great candidate that could run against her.
Well, I haven't seen any polls on the Republican side, but a couple of people have announced. Steve Hilton, the Fox News guy that had the show on the weekends, he's announced, as has a sheriff in Riverside named Chad Bianco, very popular in Riverside, not particularly very well known. And there'll be some other people, but California is a massively big state. It takes at least 100 million to 200 million to run credibly. And it's unlikely that somebody will be able to raise that kind of money. California's Republicans are outnumbered 3-1. There hasn't been a Republican who's won statewide in 20 years. As you know, I tried. In 8 weeks, I raised $27 million, but my opponent, Gavin Newsom, raised $200 million. I got 3.5 million votes, more than all the other replacement candidates combined, but Gavin Newsom got 7 million.
Larry, I wanted to ask you about your new documentary, too. I forgot to mention you're a documentarian, and I know you've got one that's up at Salem Now on electric vehicles, speaking of California. Tell us about that documentary.
It's called Electric Vehicles, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and as you mentioned, it's available on salemnow.com. It's not about climate change, however you feel about climate change. It's about whether or not an EV all-in is better for the planet than a gas-powered car. Before I started the documentary, I assumed the answer was yes. After I finished, the answer to me is no, not just because it takes gas-powered energy to manufacture an EV and to transport an EV and to charge an EV, but you have to look at the humanitarian aspect of it. The stuff that goes into the battery, the nickel, the lithium, the cobalt, that stuff is mined in places like Africa by hand. You got African kids, 10, 11, 12 years old, making $1 or $2 a day, often slave labor, digging this stuff out with their own hands, and it's toxic. So ultimately, it's cancer-causing. So if people really knew the way labor was being exploited in third world countries to mine the stuff that goes into the battery, I think that people would rethink it.
You should get like a guest role on Landman with Billy Bob Thornton.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I could see a good exchange between you two on the topic.
Yeah, I love it.
Isn't it good?
I love it. I can't wait for the next season. It's not going to come out till 2026.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I don't want to wait that long.
All in due time.
Have you guys been watching Tulsa King?
Tulsa King.
Yes, I have been. Yep.
Yeah. That's not as good as Landman, but
no, it's not.
Have you ever heard of a show called Mr. In Between?
No.
Yes, very good.
I haven't.
Yeah, a lot of people haven't. An Australian show came out a few years ago, just 3 seasons. Awesome. I've been recommending that to all my buddies.
Great show. I wish it would have gone more than 3 seasons. Since we're on our viewing habits, are you watching Mobland with Pierce Brosnan and Helen Mirren and Tom Hardy?
I heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
Oh, you got to watch it.
Brosnan, he was in a movie called The Last Rifleman about a World War II vet who wanted to summon up the energy to go to D-Day one more time on an annual trek. It is a tremendous movie, The Last Rifleman.
All right, we're going to be, a cigar night. I think I don't want to talk about politics. I want to talk about movies and books and arts and culture with Larry Elder. Forget the politics.
Are you giving him a homework assignment? He has to start watching Mobland.
Well, you should. I think he'll enjoy it. Yeah.
Very good things about it. I'm going to start.
And we it's
another good series too. That first season just ended. If you haven't seen it, it's intense, but in a good way. Good acting. Dope Thief on Apple.
Okay.
Dope Thief. Dope Thief.
A lot of homework.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds almost as good as the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3D.
Skipping that.
If you like gore movies, then we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Dan loves gory movies. Yeah.
All right, Cigar Night.
Are you going to eat that body part?
All right, we've opened up a whole new area of conversation.
You started it.
for Cigar Night. I love it. That's, again, May 21, Gobert's Farm in Pingree Grove. May 21, May 22, Gaelic Park in Oak Forest. 560theanswer.com/cigar if you want to get one of the few tickets that are remaining. And, of course, you can hear Larry Elder's show on our airwaves, 8 to 10 p.m. every weekday evening. Larry, thanks as always. Can't wait to see you next week. Appreciate it.
Okay, Dan and Amy, thank you for having me. God bless.
Thank you. And don't forget to buy those tickets, 560theanswer.com/cigar. And Mr. Elder, Larry, joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM 560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Do you owe $10,000 or more in credit card debt or personal loans? With credit card debt at all-time highs, Debt Relief Advocates is urgently notifying consumers of debt relief now being made available, designed to aid consumers without